This ain't no audiobook. This ain't a radio play. This is a Happy Cloud audio tune. It's that time again for the Further Adventures of Rune, Return of the Miggins, brought to you by Happy Cloud Media and Chrome Toothpaste. Chapter 22, Canto 5, The Garden Gate. Before them was a long stone wall, as old as time, possibly even older. They could see only darkness beyond. Okay, I just had a peek over that nasty old wall there, and I'm not gonna lie, said Father Don. It don't look like that much of fun. Unlike the endless joy we've been slogging through so far, said Scarlet. Both Rune and Dusty gave her a look. It was odd to hear tremolo in her voice. What's the plan, Chief? Whatever we do, the unkillables go first. We're used to it, said Bluebottle. Eccles said nothing, which was a relief. Okay, a monk-a-dunk, Father Don said to Brother Theodore. What do we do next? Brother Theodore sat down on the hard and dusty road. It was also long and winding, but minus the orchestra, the way it was originally intended. We must travel through the garden. He jerked a thumb at the rusty garden gate set into the squat, crumbling stone wall stretching forever on either side of the path. Well, certainly, said Dusty, but then what? The monk finished unchaining his ad nauseum and flipped through the moldy pages. From the Book of Exclusions, chapter 19, verses 12 to 16. He cleared his throat. The sound made everyone else gag. No easy task, considering they were, in hell. His voice sounded as if he were half submerged in sewage, only not as happy. The path to the Dismaedonna leads all scum and hateful pilgrims through the Garden of Trogly Delights. At the center of the garden, ye worthless truffles shall find Yggdrasil. Pimple medication? Asked Dusty. The tree of life, the tree of death, the tree of knowledge, from which grows all things, and should be chopped down as a warning to other trees. Neat, said the Gax, who hadn't had a line in a while. Now, what's a truffle? Within this tree is the passage to the Dismaedonna, but only inconsequential dopes would want to go there. Fun to God, that ob, said Father Don, who'd given up on lighting his cigar. The everywhere mist dampened more than mere joy. It curled around their bodies, forcing them to shake and slap and dance it away every few minutes. But Brother Theodore was not finished. In the place they called Dis. This? Asked Dusty. This what? This just is. This is? Duh. Okay then. Better get started if we're going to get there. If we don't stop now, we might get to where we're going, said the Gax, and the others were in agreement. Dusty gave the rusty, old, spiky, intimidating, out-of-code gate a yank. It opened with the complaining shriek of something unwilling to be born, and a cacophony of noise fled through the opening. Dusty jumped away from the din of demons drumming and piping and strumming and hooting and tooting and ram-footing and bim-boobling on their flubers and tar-tinkers, accompanied by a million tortured voices screeching in 500-part harmony without a single voice in tune. Dusty hurriedly shut the gate again. The noise stopped. Rune closed his eyes and sighed. It was going to be another one of those kind of hells. Wacky Land presents Paradise Lost. He watched a moment while Dusty peered over the low wall, straining to hear what was recently assaulting racket. Nada. Dusty looked to Scarlet, who shrugged, indicating that they had no choice but to enter. Pulling his fly boy's skull cap tighter across his sensitive ears, Dusty reluctantly opened the garden gate once again. Once or againer, malevolent dissonance poured forth with dissonant malevolence, loud enough to have weight and mass. Ever prepared, the Gax passed out wads of soft cotton suitable for ear stuffing. On his sensitive hair melon, he wore noise-canceling headphones, but they'd been a birthday present, and he'd only had the pair. Like mimes against a hurricane, the party forged against the cacophony and fought their way through the entrance to the Garden of Trogly Delights. Chapter 23, Canto 6, The Garden of Trogly Delights. But the snark was a boojum, you see, said Dusty, concluding a story that nobody was listening to, which was a shame because it had been a corker. Instead, their attention was focused on making their way through the Garden of Trogly Delights, which had a wildly different definition of delights, not to mention garden. Even of was debatable. Trogly, that was okay. Far off in the distance, in all directions, were burning cities, orange flames licking at the ash-black skies, the terrified screams of the citizens somehow overcoming the aforementioned din of the garden denizens. In the middle distance, getting neither closer nor further away in approach, was the top of the Tree of Life, their destination. Among all the other horrors awaiting them, perspective was somehow an enemy now as well. Direction, too, as the metaphoric compass never stopped hypothetically spinning. Landmarks seemed to drift vaguely about them. Landmarks, such as the expected nightmare trees and delirium shrubs. Less expected were the field of shrieking heads, the landscape of blinking eyeballs, and the mural of rude gestures. The anticipated Flurvish Inquisition was nowhere to be found. Now, were they walking uphill or down? Were up or down even applicable concepts here in the garden? "I say, don't know who's to blame, but whomever set this up made a right bosh out of it," said Dusty. "Which, I presume, makes it an Anonymous Bosch." "Hush, love," said Scarlet, taking his paw. "You always ramble when I'm nervous." "Nothing to be nervous about, dearest," he said, patting the hand of one of the most lethal warrior women the planet had ever seen. "'Tis merely hell." "Yeah," said the Gax. "We've all been through worse." Rune noted that as the Gax spoke, his non-existent nose remained very much buried in his book, quill scribbling away. How he walked and held the book and wrote with his quill while lacking any kind of arms would remain a mystery, and you, the listener, should just move on. "Very humanish," Rune observed as he trudged. 'Twas true, the majority of the souls tortured were of the humanish variety. Pale, starving, hysterical, naked, even the best minds of their generation, and ashamed for being so. Some less so, some far less than they should be. Those meting out the torture, however, were not morphic beings, so much as truly the stuff of a rarebit fiend's dreams. While Father Don seemed to be taking it all in stride, his holy books having prepared him for such sights, Brother Theodore had never looked happier. An egg passed them on humanish legs. A giant nail pierced it from fat end to narrow. The monk could barely contain his glee. "There it is," he burbled, pointing at a more or less morphic rabbit smoking a pre-roll of morphia,
Trademark.
bearing a bruised and bloody corpse above its head. "It's the Grand Duke Marmaduke, with its human uke as a yoke, taking a talk and having a joke, just as it was foretold in the Book of Frustrations, Chapter 9, verses 7.5 to 11. Oh, and there's Master Bates from the Book of Spadoinkle." To see the old gray monk dancing this way and that, greeting and shaking the appendages of the awful beasts around him was, well, also quite horrible if truth were to be told, and if you couldn't tell the truth in hell, where could you? All about them, souls shrieked and bled, vomited, excreted, rent their flesh, had their flesh rent, and rented out their flesh at reasonable prices. Those were the lucky ones, the ones writhing in their own filth and torment. Seriously, they were the privileged, a fortunate damned, I can't stress it enough. Yorkshiremen never had it so good. A child-sized humanish dragged itself forward in an endless drudge, muttering its damnable mantra. "Loaf of bread, container of milk, and a stick of butter." Behind it, a parade of demons interrupting. "3 eggs! Dave's draw cleaning! Little pads! The square root of pie?" Rune drew his sword, nose grinder, knowing it would do no good against the creatures about them. Mostly, he was using it to prod the unkillables ahead. "To think," said Eccles, "for this I gave up 3 squares and a roof above my head." "You've never had any such thing," said Bluebottle. "The closest you come was some loaded dice in your granny's buttock." "Bluebottle, you swine!" This had been going on the entire time, so the Miggins was already used to hell. After a few feet, or clicks, or whatever, they reached the Tree Man, his eggshell-thin torso hollowed out to better accommodate those living within him. They were setting the table for a meal consisting of whatever they were scraping from the walls of his ribcage. The Tree Man wore a curiously neutral expression, a mix of resignation and resentment. Curious, because upon his head was balanced a plate, and upon that plate danced several demons playing a giant scrotum as bagpipes. "How symbolic," noted Scarlet with a grimace. "Oh no, the symbols are over there, love," said Dusty, pointing to the brass clashing, as if they could possibly be overlooked. They were about to ask directions when the Miggins noticed that the Tree Man's body was being further invaded by a hooded figure climbing up a ladder. Then they noticed the arrows shoved up his bare wherewithal. They kept going. Seated upon a seat that was part throne, part toilet, was a bird-headed creature wearing a cauldron like a crown, devouring screaming humanishes and then excreting them into a cavity below, their still shrieking bodies encased in a viscous placenta. All about this bird king were horrors anew, violence, betrayal, theft. Among these horrors, a card game gone horribly wrong, leaving all players mutilated and dismembered. Demons with reflective buttocks. A knight ripped to shreds by non-morphic wolves. A tableau Rune found particularly offensive. And not to mention your greatest terrors. Yes, listener, even that one. "Excuse me, old sport," said Dusty to the creature busying itself with a circle of digestion. "Looking for the Tree of Life and all that? Found the Tree of Insanity, thanks. No need to return there." The monstrous figure paid them little attention. It merely pointed, past the symphony of giant instruments with corpses impaled and flenced upon them, including the nun lost behind the neck of the lute. and the little guy trapped in the giant rat's bass drum, past the keymaster sailing a massive horse skull down an invisible river, past the naked ice skaters, including the guy on one giant skate, looking unsteady but doing his best, past the 11 guys trying desperately to dislodge a politician from the giant flute, to the right of the puking sisters of St. Sabaceous, to the left of the mouse knight defiling a corpse, and of course, past the enormous knife wearing a giant set of humanish ears, and there they'd finally reach the Tree of Life. If they reached the Musical Buttocks, they'd gone too far. When the Holy Sisters of Perpetual Misery have finally eaten their fill, the truth of the world will expel forth. Book 7 of the Letters to Cleo! It's just nice to see him happy, said Father Don. No, it isn't, said Scarlet. No, it really isn't. Then Eccles said, Oi, the Musical Buttocks! We've gone too far, said Rune, and so they turned around. Just above a non-existent hill, scaly lizardish things were forcing armored knights into a giant lantern. One of them indicated that the tree was near. It's over there! Near it was. So near, in fact, they reached it without any further effort. A simple 180 did the trick, and yes, they all felt foolish. There it was, inexplicably growing from the ashes and blood and snee, without light above nor nutrients below, its roots touching all things in the universe, its branches every heaven. Yggdrasil, the Tree of Life. Between two massive roots was an opening through which they would reach Dismaedonna, queendom of Circe Circa, Empress of the underworld, or at least her little corner of it. The party paused at the entryway, uncomfortable at the sight of the orifice. Just seems rude to enter this way, said Dusty, gesturing to the Yonic passage and saying what they were all thinking. But there was little choice. Further into the depths or turn tail home, leaving the story much shorter than intended. Into the roots they went. Thus concludes this week's episode. Join us next week for another frivolous installment of The Further Adventures of Rune.